Lessons Learned podcast. You know, after we factor in the delay.
Yep.
So welcome to the program, everybody. As always, I have my co-host Chapelmont, and
Hello.
we are live. Setting up everything. This week it's a bit of a slow
Uh,
news week. You still have frame loss there. It takes a while, and that's when the delay kicks in. There we are. Oh, so hi again. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. There was a bit of a delay there as we were leaving our friend Frame Lost, who also has a wonderful channel. You should check it out. Fellow streamer. He's very much into FPSs, so if you like that kind of gaming, then he's your guy. But we're going to be talking about be it B tier or I guess B tier is probably the the best description of the type of games we're going to talk about. So we're going to cover some all ground and probably explore new ground. But before we do that, we are going to talk about news. And there's this week has a pair of news which are both brings so far the week to be bittersweet, especially um, in the streaming universe, Twitch, YouTube, that sort of thing, and gaming universe. The happy news is that Brooke, also known as Dodger, and her husband, also known as Strippin, welcome into the world a baby daughter by the name of
oh,
Clark. And it came in 2 weeks early, but mother, baby, and father, in that order, are doing fine, as far as we know, of course. Dodger is one of the members of the Co-optional podcast. Also was in a one of the biggest channels on YouTube for a very long time. She was one of the presenters as well. She's a streamer. She's a YouTube personality, and I think Strippin was a couple of years ago. I forgot their name of a big British trio group of streamers and YouTubers. But until he went to America and went independent. Well, not independent since he married Dodger, so there's that. Um, and so they're welcoming a beautiful baby daughter named Clark with an E. Don't ask me why they name her Clark. That's between them and the future school bullies that she'll face down and kick ass, because I'm sure she will. But that's at that point, and so that's the very good news. It's a very good
yeah.
opening for a good show. But
Congratulations to them.
congratulations to them, of course. But on the flip side, talking about the co-optional podcast, we have news that Total Biscuit, also known as John Bain, that's his actual name, also a big personality on YouTube and somewhat in Twitch, and one of the founders of the Co-optional podcast. The last round of chemotherapy basically failed. Doctors informed them, and this was put in a Reddit post by someone speaking on behalf of Jenna Bain, TB's wife, that doctors informed him that the chemotherapy was no longer working for him, basically. As some of you may have known, and those don't know, he was diagnosed at least 2 years ago, 3 years ago, with colon cancer, a relatively advanced form of colon cancer. And he has gone through several treatments, each round more invasive than the last, and as well as several operations. And so he has been battling cancer for the last couple of years. To be honest and to be fair, and to everybody watching, TB is a bit of a controversial figure in on the gaming scene, but it's also one of those people like that really pushed the sort of, I would call, the second wave of YouTube, especially YouTube gaming personalities, with AJ, that's Angry Joe, and some others. Again, he was also a big figure on one of the early channels when back channels dominated YouTube as opposed to individual YouTubers, and also has become something of a celebrity in Twitch as well, Twitch space. Someone known for being very much on the technical side of gaming, specifically a almost exclusive player of PC gaming. Someone accused me of being one of the banner carriers for the PC Master Race.
Yeah.
So regardless, I'm not gonna go into the specifics because I don't think this is the time or the place. Regardless of what I might think of some of his positions, it is in fact unfortunate that the situation has aggravated as much as it did. Although from the very beginning, and kudos to him, he's been very open about the condition, about getting screening, about people checking themselves, especially men who we tend to be a little more embarrassed about these things because they especially has to do with our private cavities and the like. And it was basically he discovered a regular checkup. You know, he went to an early checkup. He's still in his 30s, late 30s, and so there you have it. That I think it's.
And essentially, he's retiring. He'll still be making some content, but he's more or less retiring and just gonna try to make himself as comfortable as he can.
For those who don't know, chemotherapy essentially has been described as poisoning yourself in order to save yourself. It's grueling. It weakens the body. And he's been going through that for quite some time, as well as cancer itself being a very dangerous and ultimately, in many cases, deadly disease. Even in spite of all the advances that medicine has made. I haven't made any advances, but medicine has made advances to fight this. So we wish the Bain family the best. There's always hope, of course. Although we also have to be realistic, and I think that Mr. Bain, I call him Mr. Bain because I don't know him personally, of course, and I may not have the chance to know him personally now that I come to about it, but who never knows. Hope is still there. Wishing the best of luck for him, family, and I urge everybody who may be watching this here on a VOD or later on YouTube to please respect the family's wishes when it comes to these things. You're not helping by interjecting yourself in any way, shape, or form in this situation. I mean, we're commenting about it, and that's, at least for me, it's going to be the end of that. So, to other news, I actually saw the Labo has arrived on stores. I saw it on, I think, Sunday or Saturday on Walmart, my local Walmart. And it looks interesting. However, it seems that well, the news are a little mixed. It's selling well in Japan. And as toys go, it has number 1 and number 3 spots. But it is not selling at the rate expected.
Yeah.
It might just be that it's one of these things that Nintendo has been doing, experimenting and the like, and hasn't really caught on.
Or they haven't been marketing well, maybe.
Yeah, it seems very much geared for kids, but I think Jabba mentioned something that maybe the Switch itself. I go back and do that mistake, and the Switch itself might not be entirely for kids, so maybe that might be the disconnect there.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, one of the big things commented about the launch of the Switch, or at least the trailer, is that you noticed that there was a lack of children in the trailer. It's all adults. It's all young adults. Actually, even then, I think it might just be adults taking the Switch on their day-to-day life, taking it to parties, going to a live gaming event, and there's no children to be had. And here you have almost quite an investment if you think about it. Is it $70-$80 for a game and some cardboard?
I think that they come in kits. They come in, and the kits have the software, so you can actually hear how it goes. You get the cardboard, right, which is a series of things, and some of the things have more specific things to make, like the rod, the fishing rod, that sort of thing. But they come up with software, so you can have it on the Switch, and the software, when you check out the Switch, it would actually show you in 3D, or within the screen, of course, how to put it together. So it's not put it together and then sort of try to figure it out how to connect it to the Switch. The moment you get out of the box has software so that you can use the Switch. And since the Switch is portable, you can just have it with you in your lap or something, or on the floor, and work with it. And some of the kids, you can slot in like the controllers and stuff like that. Well, that's, in
Mhm.
fact, that's what they're kind of made of. Like, I think you make the kit and then you sort of slot in the Switch itself and do the motions and whatnot. Um, but I think it's one of the things that maybe it's a bit it's more of a toy. And while the Switch came out on spring last year and made gangbusters, usually, which was weird because usually you try to sell your consoles in November.
Yeah.
This is more of a toy, right? This is more peripheral, more of a toy. Probably selling it closer to December would have been better, right?
Yeah.
And maybe there's also a lack of games that go specifically with this. And again, it's a reinvention of peripherals. Well, we've seen this before. I mean, the Wii, for example, just had a bunch of stuff that you could connect with the nunchucks, right? It had
Yep.
like a gun / kind of bazooka thing. It had fishing rod. All these things used to be in plastic, and you connected the nunchucks to it, and that. So it's basically kind of going back to that. Instead of just having the whole thing together like a guitar for a game or something, is make it do it yourself. I am not a person I'm a do it myself for anywhere. I assemble things, and they're also made out of cardboard. So if you spend something like I think the lowest one is about $30 US, and the highest about $70. So spending 30, 50, $70 on something that a kid can just, or a dog can just chew or something and ruin, it might be something people are like, maybe I'm gonna wait for someone else to do it,
Yeah.
see how it works, and it is. But I think for people who, I think it's gonna be, it's a niche market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a peripheral thing. Obviously, that's what it is. It's a peripheral thing, and I think that's why I don't expect to see huge sales. But as long as it keeps selling, I mean, you had the Mii's, you had stuff like that. It's an accessory.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen this before. We've seen that's not a big problem when it comes to the Switch itself, which is still selling.
Yeah. It's certainly not a Wii U.
Yeah. Talking about stuff that's coming down the pipeline, because of course it's May. We're May 2nd. And of course, May means also the beginning of, early summer and E3, so we're gearing up for that. There was a new trailer that dropped for Red Dead Redemption 2.
Mm.
I played a little bit of that on the 360. I don't know, I just couldn't get into it. Maybe I'll
I
go
couldn't
back
get
to it.
into it either at all.
But it was a huge hit. Two things related to Red Dead Redemption is that people are saying there might be a slowdown or even an end to Grand Theft Auto 5, and basically try to migrate everybody to Red Dead, or they might try to keep both of them going at the same time. They're not exactly the same experience. One has horses and it's cowboys and stuff like that. The other one is gangsters in the city. I mean, they have kind of similar ideas, and I think this one is supposed to be goes back into history, right? It's a
it's a prequel.
It's a
to the
prequel,
first
yeah.
one.
So we'll see how it goes. I'm sure it's gonna sell well. And we're seeing other announcements, like Blizzard is announcing possibly a new game. Bethesda is also talking about a game that could be a space-based game. So that might be also something we might see in E3.
I believe people were expecting that to drop or be announced last year, but it didn't. Even though they seem to have like a space thing going on in the background. So maybe this year we'll see what that's about.
Yeah, and I think that's some of the things that we're looking at in news. Let me see if there's anything else I can pick up. The news. Let me see. Was the situation with the Halo thing is still going on. Another game that is probably going to be announced in E3 officially is going to be Black Ops 4. And of course, we already talked about the bug that the Switch has, that can be
exploited.
Basically for modding it, which is probably gonna happen sooner or later. The thing that I see, something strange piece of news that I did see was that supposedly Xbox is leading the way in, and wait for it, engagement. It seems that by the new metrics that we're going for, engagement is a thing, and basically that I think that means that people are playing on average more on the Xbox per hour than in other consoles. That seems to be the news. I have to check out more because I saw the banner headline. It was like, what does that mean? And we've talked about engagement before. Okay, maybe. Sure. But this is part of a trend of Microsoft. Microsoft it really is embracing the idea of games as service, even more so than Sony. And I think because they're seeing the trends from EA and others, and because of Xbox Live as well. And they've been shifting their metrics away from console sold. Although we heard about the Xbox One X doing very well this year,
especially with their announcements of focusing on backwards compatibility with their past titles.
However, that seems to be a secondary measure to how many people are playing Xbox Live, concurrent users, that sort of thing. Although also announcing probably there's going to be a new Halo or Halos for both PC and Xbox One X this year. Whether they're going to bring other older Xbox games, they're going to do what they did with the Halo game, the Halo Combat Evolved, and remake it and release it for PC or something like that. That could be a thing. Or they could newer games. Who knows? I hope they actually bring. I would like to see the old Halo games, Halo 2. I really love those games on the original Xbox, and I would like to play them on PC with improved graphics and whatnot. And my new controller that I actually got an Xbox X, a new controller, because the other one was a bit clicky But the thing I don't like is the shoulder buttons. It's a copy. It's not an original controller. So the shoulder buttons are, I get used to it. But the other buttons are pretty cool. So we'll see what happens with that. So I think it's another signal that Microsoft is moving away from hardware sold kind of thing, and that's why they talk about engagement and how many users they have on Xbox Live and so on and so forth. Right? I think that's what they're trying to sell us on the idea. But in the end of the game, if you don't sell hardware, you don't sell software. You don't sell software, you don't sell hardware. So that's a thing. Oh, and there was also another claim that their subscription service actually helped sell a lot of Sea of Thieves.
That subscription service. I'm like, what, Xbox Live?
Because they have a subscription service for pay $10 or pay I think whatever, and then you get your games. And apparently, a lot of people who were in that option eventually bought the game outright. In spite of the fact that maybe the game doesn't have as much content as it should have.
Yeah.
So,
but hey, if it's working out for them, it's working out.
So yeah, there might in fact be a future to games as service after all. And I'm not completely opposed to the idea, but as we're gonna talk about, and so we transition to the idea that maybe not every single game should be the big game, and not every single game should be a AAA, always on, always online, forever live service.
Oh, actually, we almost skipped over one big story too.
Go ahead.
The one where I think Norway declared a bunch of certain games to be gambling in terms of their loot boxes.
Yes. Been described by some people, especially people in Rooster Teeth, as a war against microtransactions or loot boxes or loot crates, whatever. I think that's mixed up. They're the same anyway. Yes, Norway was announcing that a series of games violated their gambling laws and could face fines and jail time. Although the Norwegian authorities are in fact negotiating with EA and other services to see what they can do. However, Electronic Arts does not fall, at least Battlefront, with the game that actually brought all the attention to loot crates, loot boxes, doesn't fall in that category just yet. Belgium has always been doing that. The initiative in Hawaii about dealing with loot boxes has stalled because the ESA has been lobbying very hard the local politicians, local legislature, but they're still pushing it. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, especially if one country in Europe does this, it might be a domino effect over there,
Mm.
which means they'll have to rethink of their entire international market.
Yes. And it really goes to the question we're talking about, importing games, exporting games, digital distribution, piracy, and size of markets, right? You say, oh, well, Belgium might have like 100,000 people that play out of a couple of million. But if it's Belgium, Norway, Germany is a country that is big on regulating games, mostly for content, especially when it comes to National Socialism, because they have laws against displaying National Socialist symbols unless under very specific guidelines, usually historical, that sort of thing. And France and other countries. So yeah, that might be a thing. And there's PEGI, which is their rating system across the EU. So if it spreads across the EU, we're talking about not thousands of people. We're talking about millions of users. And not only that, Europe, especially Western Europe, is one of the biggest users of mobile devices in the world. And that includes a lot of mobile games. So, people talk about the Asian market and the American markets, but mobile game use in Europe is pretty big. And because, using mobile games, and the term mobile, it's British slang for cell phones, and it now has sort of everybody's been using it, smartphones, mobile. That seems how much of an influence they have on the market. And some of the biggest companies also are European companies. So there's that. So we'll have to, check, see what happens with that trend. Again, going back to where unless there's another piece of news that we skipped, perhaps. We want to talk about, of course, Tier B games, and there were a couple of videos, and one of them by Jim Sterling, and some others I've seen, talking about the kind of game. It's kind of weird because these definitions of what exactly is a Tier B game or not big AAA game varies, of course. Those games there's two definitions. Essentially, any game that is not either a smallish indie game or a huge AAA game, frontline, millions invested on that game, or somewhat narrower definition of AAA games or games released by AAA companies that are they're second tier, right? They're not their main focus, in terms of advertising or funds or whatever, but they're still AAA games, and the publishers and studios and the platforms and the quality and polish and everything that we came to associate with AAA games. And there seems to be a dearth, an absence of these games lately. In part because, again, defining these games is kind of hard. Because you say, oh, well, let's talk about God of War. Something people talk about it's like, oh, hey, EA, you don't want single-player narrative-driven experiences, and here is a huge hit from Sony, which is God of War. But is God of War a Tier B game, really? I mean, it's been huge for a long time.
It's probably not, considering, especially since it's not really a spin-off, and it's because God of War has had multiple spin-offs before, and this is supposed to be more of a primary entry into the God of War franchise.
A reboot of all sorts.
Yeah, and I wouldn't really call that one a B game, but it does raise a question as to how much of it is. What would you consider a B game? Is it a new franchise? Is it something that didn't have quite as much money, or maybe not even expected to be as big?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the only reason why you might call this a B game is because it's console exclusive, as opposed to be the kind of game that you see in every platform and in every, a PC, Xbox, Switch, PlayStation. But again, the PlayStation is the lowest common denominator of this era, post 360, whatever, because there are a couple of machines that are out there, and sort of blended together in this generation. So it has millions of users. A game for the PlayStation is kind of gonna, if you go big or you go home in some cases.
Yeah.
And again, this is a big AAA game. I think maybe it's more like what was the game that came out last year that
Hellblade.
no, not Hellblade. It was early in the year, and it was about robo dinosaurs and
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Horizon Zero. I think Horizon Zero Dawn. It's closer to what I would see as again, and then there's also the overlap with we call double A industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where of course it's Sony exclusive, and Sony is by virtue of being also a console maker for big console maker. It's also kind of like a big publisher as well. So it's a AAA publisher because the amount of games out there. But Horizon Zero Dawn became a darling of both players and streamers and critics, and it has the polish of a AAA game, but it was never, I think, meant to sell like the double digits of millions, right?
Yeah, have a complete sort of Game of the Year edition like version of it re-released. And
no microtransactions. I guess now we can say that maybe the tier B games are more standalone games. They're not designed to be live services. They're not designed to be always on. They're not the MMO lights, right, or the equivalent. I think those are God of War was never meant to be a microtransaction ridden play for 300 hours kind of game, right? Or months on end, right? It's you playing. It's a solo experience. So, okay, let's sort of run down on things it could be. Primarily a solo experience, right? So we don't have the sort of multiplayer, not a always on online, and by not always online I mean not a game that is designed with multiplayer driven or be a extended experience for months and years. Not a live service. Not one can have microtransactions, but not necessarily dominated by them. And one that I think finally the last requirement, one that in order to be successful doesn't have to sell in the tens of millions. I think that's the key here, right?
Yeah, not a Tomb Raider or a Resident Evil 6.
Well, I think Tomb Raider ironically does classify as or should have been classified as a tier B game.
Yeah, right? That's probably what they should have. The amount of investment Square Enix probably should have invested into Tomb Raider, but since they invested so much money, they needed 10 million copies. But oh no, it only sold like 5 million. So
no, actually made the 10 million.
Oh, was it 10 million? How much did it?
Yeah. I think the thing was that they were expecting initial sales to be something like 6 or 7 million, and they came like 2 or 3 million. Yeah. It made over 10 million over a period of a year, but they made those sales probably came by severe discounts.
Yeah.
So it should have been like the original Souls game, like the first Dark Souls and Demon Souls. I think they could have considered to be like AA games.
Yeah, I think of like the old era of like PlayStation 2. We got your Ratchet and Clanks, you got your Jack and Dexter, Sly Coopers, those that became popular and had their many spin-offs, and even then those were probably not, they never really got all that big either.
Yeah,
they didn't seem like they invested like more money, more advertising into it. They seemed to kind of maintain that level.
Yeah. Persona 5, the Persona series from the Shin Megami spin-offs. I think a lot of Japanese games could be classified in that, but the American market is more obsessed with the big game, right? Not to say that a B tier game cannot blow up and be very successful.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It's not I think it's all about really the mindset from the advertising and publishing point of view. This is a game. It's like a B tier movie, right? It's like making a movie off season, right? You make your big budget. Now that we're coming to May, we have Avengers and your Black Panther stuff like that, which is the big movies, and then they make a bunch of movies that are much smaller that don't have the advertising budget. They don't have the budgets to they're not multi hundreds of millions of dollars to make, but also they don't have to make as much money.
Yeah, like something like Deadpool.
Yeah.
Even though that's not related to.
I think I could make the comparison to a couple of years ago. I saw some figures about the British movie market. And what was interesting was that usually number one was every week, right, was a big Hollywood movie. But number two and number three, or number two to number five, usually slotted in were local UK films. And the budgets for those movies were still in the millions of dollars in many cases, $20 million or $30 million, that sort of thing. But they would make 2 or 3 times their budget compared to the big Hollywood movie, who has to make that budget not only in the UK but worldwide in order to even break even. So I think the big thing here is the expectations, right? As opposed to, what, content or length or microtransactions or anything else, right? If you of course, that's the thing that with live services, your expectation has to be big because we just discussed it before. You need a big player base that can sustain the game and buys the whales and the dolphins and all of that. So yeah, any live service game has to be big. But one of the points that I think both Jim Sterling and the people people at my check, I drew a blank. Our friends over there, we talked about them before. At
Co-optional?
No, not co-optional. I hate when there's my mind. I'm getting old. This is a sign that I'm getting old. I'm an old man. That's what's going on. Nope. Credits. No, I forgot the first name of them. Extra credits. Our friends at EC also made a video about this. And they talked about, one of the things they talked about was that these games, basically they talk about Wolfenstein 3D, especially the remakes of it, which is also a big franchise. And of course, it got overshadowed by Doom back in the day, even today, because I would say the Doom game was pretty cool and pretty much a big, AAA game, right, with a lot of money and VR and all of that. But one of the things they were saying, and I think Jim sort of echoed this, was that the Wolfenstein, they compared Wolfenstein, the New Order, and Wolfenstein, the Wolfenstein that came out when it was remade, with the latest Call of Duty. Like, basically the argument was Call of Duty, for the first time, had the courage to mention the Holocaust. Fair enough.
Yep.
But it was like a mention, and that was it. It didn't really delve into it. Wolfenstein, on the other hand, was Nazis are bad, and let me show you all the reasons why Nazis are bad and deserve to get shot in the face, right? It was really able to and willing to take these risks. Ironically enough, it has smaller budgets. I think with smaller budget makes that the game itself is less risky financially, which allows them to make other types of risks, narrative risk, gameplay risk, because those games are pretty wacky. I mean, they're gonzo games, but you were able to make these statements. Another video I saw was about Far Cry 5, one of our newest, at least mine, Whipping Boys. And one of the criticisms about Far Cry 5, aside from the horrible story, is that it doesn't really make any statements.
Yeah.
It kind of does, but not in the way people expected. Right? It was
it tries to be provocative, but not really. It tries to stay safe with
Yeah,
its.
it plays it safe, and you can certainly see that Far Cry has become one of these big Ubisoft open world games, right? And it certainly has an emphasis on multiplayer. It certainly has microtransactions. I wouldn't say it rises to the level of live service. I mean, the Division and stuff like that is sorry where Ubisoft would probably go with that. Um, Although we might see Far Cry become that in future, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually all the Ubisoft games sort of morph into one Blizzard style, as Blizzard's been trying to do with their games. But yeah, I mean, you play it safe because you don't want to alienate certain people. You know, you have to make so much money just to break even that you don't that stops you from taking risk.
Yep.
And making statements. Of course, there's some people who say, well, video games shouldn't make any political statements, blah, 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 and all that. Yeah. But again, if you think that video games are art, they always make a statement, even if it's incidental.
Yeah. There's a game I've been playing this week it's a little bizarro puzzle game. It has some adult content in it, but one of the characters just kind of starts talking, hey, about sexuality labels, like, hey, do you label yourself as such? What does that mean? What if you find the gender that you don't usually like attractive? Does that mean you would change your label? Why not? And it's just kind of just starts talking to you like that. I'm like, see, it's like, I like that. I like that this game is, even though it's supposed to be this interesting puzzle game with some adult content in there, that it's like, oh, you're making me think about something. You don't have to, but there it is.
Mm-hmm.
You're making a statement.
Yeah, and I think also there's also the fact that the BTB level games can also experiment with their gameplay. I'm a mechanics kind of person.
Yeah.
And they can do things that, again, going back to the example of Ubisoft, they're I would call them the formula company, right? Everybody knows what a Ubisoft game is supposed to be, and they might make tweaks and improvements on some of these things over time, but they're barely noticeable.
Yeah, and so much so that they probably end up kind of watering down the original concept.
Yeah, because it's all, I think it's really all about risk, and you can't take those risks. Like, I've been playing game I'm playing currently on stream is BattleTech. It's a hard game, right? If this had been it's like XCOM, right? You can't have a big AAA BattleTech game like that unless it's a multiplayer or something like that, because the idea of a very hard tactical game, a lot of people they will be frustrated.
Yep.
And the thing I like about BattleTech game is that I'm awful at it. Right now, I am still kind of in the beginning, and I'm horrible at it. It's not a perfect game; it has some problems, but it's sort of like the get good at it. Again, it reminds me of the Souls games, right? And now I'm starting to understand what the people find attractive in it. It's like, oh, I don't want to die a dozen times over. Yes, I am a safe scummer. If you haven't seen my channel, you can check it out so you can see the fact that I am a safe scummer. But here's the thing. Like, currently, I'm on a mission, and the game says, "Oh, you should just get the hell out of there." But there's a bunch of mechs between me and the objective. If I just follow the instructions, I die. I have to think tactically. I have to think, okay, this is the way. I have to find innovative solutions. At least to me, are innovative solutions to the tactical problems, right? Mm-hmm. Therein. I never really feel like the game is cheating me. It's hard, and it's like, oh, the 20 mechs show up. It's like, okay, this is gonna be a tough fight. I never feel like the game has cheated me yet. It always feels like if something happens wrong, it's maybe RNG, right? Because there's roll the die, percentages and all that. Or I screwed up. It was me. It's all about getting good, right? And you can see it when the game ramps in difficulty because more enemies or tougher enemies or better AI. You're like, oh, okay. And also when they have faulty AI, you can also exploit that as well. I don't see again a Ubisoft, an EA game, any other a Warner Brothers game, anything like that taking those kind of risks, right? Uh,
Yeah, and I mean, you really have to look at like some long running franchises among these companies. Say like our favorite whipping boy, BioWare. If you look at their older games, their RPGs, those have like a higher bar of entry because you have to be aware of stats and all these RNG mechanics. And look at their games now. Their latest Mass Effect game doesn't really have any of that anymore. They tried kind of putting them back a little compared to what they kind of took out from number 2,
mhm.
but it's easier. I guess I don't know. You get like to that point where you're inclusive, which is great, but then it kind of diminishes what made that franchise special.
Yeah, I don't think that you could go back to a Baldur's Gate where you could die just in somebody just looks at you wrong and your character's dead
Yeah,
at first level or
or
something like that.
or the Fallout series. It's completely different to what Bethesda has done with it. That I'm sure that a lot of fans of those of 3 New Vegas and Fallout 4 would probably never be into or even attempt to try to play the original Fallout and Fallout 2.
Well, talking about Fallout, I mean, Fallout 4 is also one of the criticism. I mean, still, I played it. I haven't finished it. I'm probably gonna go back and play it again when certain mods drop. Because I really want to play it as a modded game mostly. Because it's a Bethesda game. That's basically how you play it on PC. As a heavily modded game. The vanilla experience is, at least for me, it's pretty good. But there's certain there's an opening sequence in the original Fallout title sequence, an opening sequence, where you have two American, well, this is an alternate universe, but still two American soldiers in power armor during the, and I kid you not, the invasion of Canada, where there's a prisoner, which is bound and taken prisoner, and one of these soldiers levels a gun at the head of this bound prisoner and literally blows their heads off. And then the soldiers laugh. Right?
Yeah.
You try to put that in, especially in a AAA game right today.
Yeah.
The storm or controversy, would be, enormous. But that's basically the vision of the game, saying, because if the game itself was the Fallout games are very interesting. I've done quite a bit of talk about them. But in many ways, they were a follow up of Wasteland, which was a game that dropped in the 1980s, and the Fallout games came out in the mid to late 90s. But they were trying, post Cold War, but they were making kind of oblique references to Wasteland by way of criticism of the 80s, by way of the 1950s.
I believe that I think the same studio tried to make like a Wasteland 2, but since they didn't have the rights to the IP, they essentially created Fallout.
Yeah, basically that was it. And Wasteland 2 actually came out as an indie game so many years ago. I probably have to play it again. I started playing it, but that's a lot of RNG bullshit as well. And I mean, I'm not opposed to games being necessarily easier necessarily. I mean, if that makes it playable. I mean, yeah, I played out the original Fallout and Fallout 2. If I were to go back, I'll probably go like, no. After the 15th time that somebody, I tell somebody to shoot someone else and they just knife me in the back or something, or blow me to pieces with a submachine gun. It's like, but the enemies are over there, right? Or me, swinging 20 times and not doing minimal damage to a plant or something. Yeah, that can get tiresome pretty quickly. I mean, different stroke for different folks, a game like that. But still, the kind of political statements, the kind of sort of tongue-in-cheek comedy that Fallout had, it's sort of very grim, dark comedy. I don't think you can really get away with it, because in many ways you have to sort of make not so oblique commentaries about the United States and politics and all that. People on either side of the spectrum would find intolerable.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that a lot of these franchises that find success nowadays with bigger publishing companies, they take that element of what makes them unique to make them more mass market appeal.
Hmm.
We saw that with Dead Space, and we saw that with Resident Evil franchise. They took what was essentially horror games and turned them into action games to appeal more towards other people that probably wouldn't like the horror aspect as much,
Hmm.
even though that's what make those games special. It's almost essentially they took out if they made a Mass Effect game, but they took out like, oh, we're not going to be in space anymore. We're just going to hang out on Earth, and there's just some aliens running around, but we never go out to space.
Yeah, and I hate to make the movie analogy, but I think because we're talking about budgets and we're talking about productions here, and just I don't know, to close something because that beeping is driving me insane. Uh, there you go. Sorry about that, folks. The messing with the lights. The thing about what was my idea? Oh, I drew a blank. Be it tier B games is that since they don't have it's in the comparison I want to make with Hollywood. Like in Hollywood makes a lot of movies, and most of the movies that Hollywood makes are just considerably smaller than the big movies everybody recognizes, and they serve multiple purposes. They serve essentially like a like a farm team for actors. In fact, the old Hollywood system was built around these secondary movies, like chucking out a lot of movies that were cowboy movies and team movies and stuff like that. The stuff that you could put out every week in the cinemas, right? And a lot of actors and actresses, directors, writers, producers cut their teeth in these smaller movies, and the ones it's like a farm team of baseball or whatever other sports you prefer. People who don't know farm teams are basically their recruitment and training teams, that also go and put on, that they, also play at smaller stadiums and for smaller local crowds. They can harvest that talent for bigger projects later on. And I think in the video game industry, especially when you have such a big turnaround, and people are coming in and out into the studios, you could keep more of your talent in your studios if you actually had a lineup of smaller projects. Ironically, also because we were talking about profit margins, you never know what's going to be a hit until it's a hit, right? So if you're always banking on the biggest game you're putting out there being always the biggest hit, the risk increase accordingly. But if you have a group of smaller games out here that are consistently making you bank, right? There's always a chance one of those games will become the next big thing. You're playing averages here. You're playing the game of averages. Also, you're spreading the cost and the risk as well. You can experiment with those games. And it's like, oh, we found a new thing for the formula that we can, okay, boom. Up it goes. And if it doesn't, as long as it makes you a profit, it's also good, right? You can also even do like accounting tricks against these games, like like Hollywood does. Like, oh, this movie was very costly, it failed as well. We're gonna use these other franchises or other movies to move the money around and put the profits against the losses, and in that sense, it kind of works with Hollywood, and it actually might work for the video game industry at some level.
Yeah.
So I guess that used to be the way what happens. People would make games and then they would go to bigger and bigger projects. Talk about Casey Hudson, one of our favorite whipping boys. He started, I think, all the way back with KOTOR, if not, or Jade Empire, one of those two games. I think he certainly was part of KOTOR. And as the company grew, he got bigger and bigger projects. because he had proven himself in lower positions, and so he stayed with the company. Now, somebody like Casey Hudson just comes in, does a thing, and literally leaves the next day, right? We need a little bit of sense of permanency, and having sort of this I would call it the bullpen of video games, right? The sort of second tier reserve of items. Also, I think for consoles, particularly, it's very important to have tier B games, because you need those games to come out uh, outside of holidays or big release windows. You,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the past, but even today, you still want to have that sale. Like, oh, we got this new game coming in. Oh, nobody's selling a big game today. Well, here's a game for you. You know, boom, and I don't have to put it in with a 20% discount or something like that.
Yeah.
And it also is a good counter for the sort of the flood of crap that stuff places like that Steam have, right?
Yeah.
Because a game that is backed up by a known studio and or a publisher, by that very nature, will probably do a little bit better than all the asset flits and stuff like that that's out there, right? It's like, yeah, I could try my hand on that, or I could play this decently looking game that could be fun, especially when I don't have anything else to play with. And also, I think another aspect of this, and we talk about the double A, and when we talk about the double A industry, it's the pricing. I think this is the part where you could also be more flexible in pricing as well from the get go, right? You don't, not every game has to be $60+ because we already talked about that. That's a myth. The $60 game is a myth.
Mm-hmm.
So these smaller games don't have to make as big sales, and therefore don't have to make, they're not as risky, which means you can have the game come out at $40. At 30, I think 30 to $40 would be a good price range, right?
Yeah.
And that makes them automatically more attractive, especially if it's something that is out there. I mean, and also I think tier B tier games are usually the games that ultimately are the ones that generate either new genres or new versions of genres.
Yeah.
I mean, look at PUBG. Uh, it wasn't the first one to create the battle royale, but it took the idea from survival games where people basically what they were doing, they were just going out getting equipment and killing each other, right? Like, why don't we get all that building stuff and all that out of the way and just let people kill each other? Oh, they want to do that? Great. Boom. There you go. And now everybody wants to make battle royale games because that's where the money's at.
Mm-hmm.
But how are you gonna? The thing about this is like a wave, right? You have the people who generate the wave, then you have people cresting the wave. Like Fortnite right now is cresting the wave, but I think now what's gonna happen is the wave's gonna crash as everybody wants to do the battle royale. No, you want to be the one who's building the wave back there. In order to do that, you can't really do it with a not gonna take any risk type of game like the big AAA live services. You just can't. There's no room for it. Nobody's gonna greenlight it. So that's my final thought on that. Anything you want to add?
No, I'd say I agree. In terms of sustainability, I think that's exactly what the market needs, is to just put out smaller titles. They don't have to be indie level, but they can. Then they don't have to have the exorbitant amounts of budget as a triple A. Just put out new genres out there, try out new franchises. And even then, just put out like smaller titles in general. Because when you think about it, I think a lot of our most of these other genres or bigger franchises started out as small franchises or these mid-tier games. Uh, even though I kind of think that at slowly that they kind of, the more money they have, I think they do lose that soul.
Mm-hmm.
I think of like the first Ratchet, this PlayStation 4 Ratchet and Clank is kind of a little abysmal compared to like the first one, which is what it's modeled after.
Mm-hmm.
But and honestly, I don't think every like mid-tier game needs to be a triple A game. Like it can stay there and it can be fine. Just have your small audience and put out something that might attract a little more audience, and have that audience kind of spread the word about this game or this franchise, and just kind of stay there. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but you kind of also have to know your audience as well.
In other words, built on the quality of what you made and not on the advertising and the formula and everything else.
Yep.
Quality will speak for itself. Well, that makes perfect sense. Well, with that, as always, we come to the close of the hour and therefore the close of our program, which is about an hour long, so it's a bit short, but we like it that way. So before we go, Chapamon, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Chopamon pretty much anywhere, and I'm on Twitch and Twitter at Chopamon_Aragon.
And you can find me here on Twitch under Lessons Learned 1. The 1 is always important. I'm playing Battletech, the game, an indie game by Hairbrain Scheme Studios. I'm having a great time of it. And if you want to see someone fail and fail miserably and save scum and fail again, I'm your guy. And of course, on Saturdays, I also do 3980, which is my tabletop RPG streaming. And you can find some of the VODs from here, including this show, on my YouTube channel, also known as Lessons Learned. So thank you all for coming. And as always, we'll see you when we see you. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.